That time a boss killed his own company. This is my dad's story, but he's not into Reddit. My dad is a hard worker. This happened about 15 years ago. Worked for a company that fixed and rented heavy equipment, backhoes, scissor lifts, steamrollers, forklifts, etc. His boss, the CEO of the company, whom he reported to directly, was a middle-aged Italian guy whose grasp of English was tenuous at best. He understood what people were saying, but had trouble communicating his own intentions back clearly. On the other hand, my dad had zero grasp of Italian but spoke perfect English. However, he was a solid mechanic who would go on to make the machine bay of this company something approaching a Sherman production line a la 1943. Shit got done. And, even though he didn't always understand what the boss wanted him to do, he just focused on the reason he was hired: manage the repair bay, hire new mechanics, train new hires and off-site on-call repairs. Well, boss guy gets it in his head that my dad is going to replace him as the leader of the company, because he's much better liked, speaks perfect English in an English-speaking country and has basically all the department heads coming to him for help, even though he's technically only in charge of the repair bay. And so, he calls my dad in, chews him out. We think it was mostly Italian, so my dad wasn't picking up on it, but the tone indicated as much, and manages to communicate that he's being fired for poor work performance, and my dad just smiles, shakes the guy's hand and leaves. And, thanks to his less than firm grasp on both the English language and business law, the boss guy just sent him on his way with his last paycheck and nothing else. So my dad started his own business in the heavy equipment mechanic market. And, after telling all his old work buddies about the situation, suddenly got a bunch of new hires, and his old workplace suddenly had a lot of vacancies that the boss had no idea how to fill, because the guy he'd hired to do that had just been fired. He went under about 6 months later. Sometimes, my dad drives past where the old shop was, on his way to a call. When he does, he just laughs and laughs. TLDR, a paranoid boss fired my dad because he was afraid my dad was muscling him out. My dad left and went on to create a successful rival business as a heavy mechanic repairman, and heavy equipment instructor. His old job was shut down 6 months later. Edit: for everyone who's been saying this isn't malicious compliance, here's why I think it is. When my dad was brought into the office, he knew right away that he was getting fired, and he knew right away what the hell he was being fired for. Of course, the boss didn't say that the reason he was firing my dad was because he was feeling threatened by my dad's popularity and work ethic. Instead, he just blustered through my dad's poor work performance and fed him a line of bullshit about how he'd put up with it for a long time, but enough was enough. And my dad thought about taking him to court, but then, as he tells it, a bolt of lightning came down from on high and he just reached out and shook his boss' hand. He knew that if he took the asshole to court, he might get money out of him, almost certainly would have, but his boss would have had time to think about things and try to force a non-compete contract down his throat. By just resigning immediately, he knew his ex-boss would never even think of it until it was too late. And he double-timed it, putting in paperwork to get his new company off the ground before ex-boss could think of it. So maybe I didn't explain details and motivations clearly enough, but, based on how my dad told the story, I think it definitely fits into malicious compliance.
Now to the comments. The most humbling truth of business is that you will create your own destruction. A toxic workplace will spawn your competition, and poor services will drive your customers to the other guy.
If you scale up big enough though, you can discard all that. Once you're big enough like Comcast, Amazon, and Walmart, you can treat your customers like trash, treat your employees like trash, and still make money hand over fist. There will be no competition to worry about once you achieve monopoly status. If you lobby hard enough in DC, the feds won't smack you with those pesky antitrust laws either.
Scale up big enough and you can never fail? Like Sears, Circuit City, GM, Amaco, Pan Am, Woolworth, and Washington Mutual. No one is too big to fail, it's just a matter of how you set yourself up to fail. Lesson learned: treat your staff with respect. Don't let your insecurity ruin your life.
Learn the dominant language of the country you live in.
I can't even imagine living in a country without being able to communicate in that language. Dad, what do you do whenever you're feeling down? Dad, well, there's this place I drive by.
I worked for an ATT dealer for 8 years, and due to how they treated me towards the end, cutting benefits, putting caps on my commissions because I was selling too much, not allowing me to use my PTO, etc., I now get great enjoyment every time I drive past and think of how happy I am with the small business I started immediately afterwards.
Putting caps on my commissions because I was selling too much. I'm not in sales, but I've heard about commission caps a couple of times in recent weeks, unrelated posters, and can't figure out why in the hell any company would do such a thing. It makes no sense at all to punish employees for doing their jobs too well. I would have made your dad a managing partner and headed to the house. I would just come to the shop to pick up earnings and then back to the fishing boat.
I know an owner who has done that very thing. His head mechanic is a consummate sledneck who more often than not wears an ankle bracelet. Sledneck is always in a good mood and loves fixing anything. I think the owner bails him out now and again.
I learned a new term today. Before now I had never even heard the term sledneck before. Just the push your dad needed. He should thank that dumb bastard.
I got fired from a dead-end job because a CO worker told my boss I would fail a drug test. I made 6 figures last year at a job that lets me smoke weed off the clock. The best revenge is living well.
Congrats, dude, that's awesome. This is my dad's story, but he's not into Reddit. My dad is a hard worker. I also was a hard worker until I got into Reddit.
OP replied. Which is why I posted this story and not him. Thanks to COVID, I'm putting the lack back in Slacker. So it's Reddit. All the time.
A self-fulfilling prophecy. The Italian wasn't wrong in the end. Just about the company your dad would do that in.
Most places would make you sign a non-competition waiver in order to get a severance package.
Sometimes you're in a good enough position to walk away from severance, and even if you're not, a whole lot of non-competes are unenforceable. Although I enjoyed the story, I don't know if this is malicious compliance. Perhaps it would fit better in r/regular revenge.
Was thinking that. Honestly, so many posts lately have just been revenge stories, not malicious compliance, and it's getting really frustrating.
This one isn't even revenge. It's just witnessing someone mess themselves up trying to hurt you and doing the best you can with the situation. I'm trying to figure out what sub this would fit in. I have a question for your dad, since he's in the heavy equipment biz. Our neighborhood rented a ditch witch to cut new borders for our volleyball court, but since it was mostly digging sand where the old volleyball court was, does that make it a sandwich? I'll just let myself out.
Ah, I liked that joke. Don't leave, tell some more.
Reminds me of a company my friend used to work for. These 3 guys worked for a state agency, responsible for building and maintaining some kind of network. In the mid-90s, a few local businesses approached them for some help in doing the same. As the companies were becoming more connected, they wanted to do some work in the evenings and weekends, but were bound by their contracts not to do this work for anyone else. They applied for an exemption and were denied. Each of the guys was making, maybe, $50K-$70K in their government jobs, and decided to roll the dice. They left their jobs and founded their firm. On the second day that they were gone, the state realized that no one else knew how to do what these guys did, and so wanted to hire them back. They had already lined up a few contracts with local companies, and so knew they'd be very busy. They, partly joking, partly in spite, threw out a multi-year contract at $9 million per year, $3 million each. It took about a week, but the state agreed. That was the revenue that allowed them to staff up into a multi-billion-dollar IT company, and they're still going strong. I was told the story in a hangar full of their corporate jets, so am included to believe at least the gist of it.
This happens all the time in specialized maintenance. Train a guy to work on a special piece of equipment. He's so goof at it, so you just always ask him. Don't make time for him to train the next you guy because you're always trying to get max use out of your guys. Trained guy retires and management realizes he was the only one who knew the equipment, now have to hire retired guy back as a consultant to work on the machine at a huge premium. Usually it happens because the manager fails to recognize special skills and abilities. You think all electricians or mechanics are the same because they hold a license. You can specialize in so many different areas as an electrician. There may as well be sub-trade categories. I believe in the States there is sometimes